Right, so we're gonna start. And this session will be about data sharing and why it's a key enabler for data mesh. And Francesco will be talking about this, so enjoy.
Thank you. Does this work? Yes. First of all, thank you for being here. I know it's the last day of the conference and you must all be exhausted. So thank you for making this breakout session. It's called Delta Sharing, the Key Data Mesh Enabler. Let's have a quick look at the agenda. First, I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction about myself, what I do, the client, and what their challenge was. Then we're going to look at the two solution designs that we assessed for this client. I look at the results that we achieved through this architecture and what is next, right? How do we maintain this architecture and make sure that this is future-proof, right? So let's start. I'm Francesco Pizzolon. I work in the UK for Avanade. I'm a director of data engineering. I have 12 years plus experience in data engineering across many industry verticals. I've started my career in banking, then I worked in retail, transportation, energy, and public sector. And feel free to scan the QR code if you want to connect on LinkedIn. And here I'm mentioning my years of experience, not because I want you to gauge my age, but because it's relevant to what we're going to talk about later. Yeah? So let's talk a bit about the client and their challenge. So the client is Sizewell C. For those of you who don't know, it's a new nuclear power station that they're building in the UK on the East Coast in Suffolk. It's going to be a 3.2 gigawatt power station. It's going to power around 6 million homes. And it will be a close copy of another power station that is in construction in the UK, in Somerset, called Hinkley Point C. They're both owned by EDF, Energy de France. And the UK Gov has a stake in these companies as well. And these two new power stations, just to give an idea of how important they are for the UK, they will play a key role in UK energy's future, especially given the geopolitical space that we are in at the moment. And this industry vertical is very, very different from any other industry vertical that I worked in before. So you can see a typical timeline here for a nuclear power station construction project, right? So first, you have to have the political will to construct a new power station. So they initiate the project. There is a committee that evaluates where is it best to build a new power station, right? What part of the country, typically close to a source of water. And then, as you can imagine, nuclear is a really heavy regulated area, thankfully, right? After these first initial phases are done, then you start designing your power station and planning how it's going to be constructed. So then we have detailed design and planning. We have the procurement and manufacturing of, from the nuclear reactors to the cement needed for constructing the buildings. Then we have the actual construction. And we have the installation and testing of all the systems that have to be running the power station. We have commissioning. We have the actual operational handover where whatever company, public or not, is going to run the power station is going to actually be handed over the operations. And then finally, we have the ongoing operations, the production of electricity for the country, and the maintenance of the power station up until it gets decommissioned, right? So as you can see, it's a very waterfall project, right? What I have there, it's about 7 to 8 decades timeline. It's not a quick thing to do, right? It's very waterfall, it's not really agile. I think the latest figures, they speak about 20 billion pounds investment from both public and the private sector. So it's a massive, massive project, right? And as I was brought in to build a data platform for Sizewell C, the first thing that I looked at when working closely with the CIO and the business leads was, well, how is this company structured at very high level, right? So what you need to know is it's not one company really, right? It's a joint venture. You can see this as a joint venture company. So they have massive partners that are delegated for design, construction, HVAC, manufacturing and operations. And they also have the ONR, the Office for Nuclear Regulations in the UK. So all these bodies are different companies. Some of them are in competition with each other, but they all collaborate in the space to build a new power station for the UK, right? So they have to collaborate. And the first thing that I looked at after this was, okay, so how I have to build a data platform. I've done that many times. And you start with the operational systems. Where are they, right? Who is actually running these operational systems? And it turned out that when speaking to Sizewell and the partners, they already had their own operational systems running in their company. So the construction partner had operational systems that they needed for construction, same for the design partner, for manufacturing, etc. Some operational systems were centralized in Sizewell C, like the identity management, the payroll systems for everybody. But most of the partners had their own systems, right? They are a company specializing in that space. They know what they're doing. They've been using those systems for quite a long time for many different projects. And the next thing I look at was, okay, what about the data team? So who are the people running the data platform at the moment in these companies? So it turned out that the company, together with having their own operational systems, they also had their own data teams. And these are people that have been working for these companies for a long time. They know the operational systems really well. They know what data they need to get out of those systems and what the business will ask in terms of insights. And some of them were more mature than others. Some of them were on-prem. Some of them were already in the cloud. These are data architects, data engineers, ML engineers, etc., right? So then what's next, right? Before, as a solutions architect, before I go and design anything, I like to reflect, take a moment and reflect on the users we are serving, right? The personas that we are serving. So it's a data platform. The first users are dashboard users, right? So these are people that to do their job better, they need to monitor anything on a dashboard that's predefined, and that's what you give them, right? You give them a dashboard. Then typically you have some more advanced users. You can give them a relational model. They can self-serve on that. So the model is built of tables, of relationships between the tables, of predefined measures, and these people can go in, maybe with Power BI, right? And self-serve on those data models, create their own reports, etc. And then you have the classical data analysts that we didn't substitute with LLMs yet. So these are people who know SQL, who know the tables. They know the primary keys. They know how to join the tables. They know how to perform aggregations. They get queried by the CIO, the CFO, maybe even the CEO on the performance of the company, and they translate that into queries, and then they get the results, right? So these are the personas that we focused on when building the first version of this platform. And I want to spend a bit of time talking about non-functional requirements. This was really important, and they are key to understand why we went down a certain route with the platform. So the first was very clear, right? When engaging with the CIO, one of the first things that he told me was, well, the data has to stay in the UK. We don't want the data to go over this boundary. And next, he wanted all the partners to actually work in Sizewell C's Azure tenant. This is a way to control cost, right? And then the operating model. So when talking to not only Sizewell C, but the partners, it became very clear from the beginning that they wanted a level of isolation. Remember, these companies are competitors. They don't want to share their IP. They don't want to be in one lake, even though you could use a folder structure, POSIX permissions to separate them in one lake. They didn't want to do that, right? That's not the maximum level of isolation you can achieve in an Azure tenant. So they wanted their IP to be safeguarded. They wanted the intellectual property right to be safeguarded. They don't want to share that unless they have to for contract reasons. And then remember the timeline I showed before. So that's 8 decades, right? It's a waterfall project. It's a construction style. It's like you're constructing a house. And some of the partners, we don't even know who they're going to be. They still have to engage them, right? The commissioning partner is not even there yet. So it was important for this platform to be flexible enough so that if a partner in the future, for whatever reason, they didn't want to come and work in the Sizewell Azure tenant, the platform needed to be flexible enough so that they can be part of the ecosystem and not be isolated from the rest of the partners and the companies that are working in this architecture. Then we have data sharing, right? Different companies, different partners, they recognize from experience that they need to share data from each other, and they wanted to do that in a secure, reliable, and auditable way, right? We need to understand who's accessing what data products, and we have to have an immutable trail of who does that for audit reasons. And the last thing was time to value. So as you can imagine, this is a new company. They're 3 years old. Some of the operational systems are there. Some of them are getting rolled out as we speak. And they have a guideline of using SaaS products now, right? So these get rolled out pretty fast. You don't need to purchase infrastructure or go through large implementations. You know, they just buy licenses and the engineers start working with those systems, right? So the system, the platform, the data platform needs to be flexible enough to accommodate this rapid change of the operational systems the company is using. So let's talk a bit about solution design. Remember when I mentioned that I have 12 years plus experience? I've always worked with centralized data platforms. So you have a bunch of operational systems on the left. You have a centralized platform in the middle. And then you serve your users on the right, your dashboard users, your self-serve users, or your data analysts. And the data gets extracted, loaded, and transformed in the centralized platform, and then you serve your users, right? So how would the operational model for a data team look like with a centralized platform? Well, it's pretty easy, right? There is one team, there is one backlog. You might want to prioritize, different areas of your requirements, especially that in this case we have multiple teams coming from multiple partners. You have to constantly reprioritize, and it didn't feel quite the right fit, right? So especially they are competitors. They want to, carry on with their own roadmap and agenda, and they don't want to deal with the other teams pretty much whilst doing that. So back when we were analyzing what solution design was better, there was a new, let's call it trend, right? And I'm the first skeptical here, right? But this new architecture pattern is called data mesh. It's a distributed pattern. And if you read the textbook from Zamac, the first thing that they say is they challenge the centralized data platform approach, right? So they have 2 failure modes. The first one is the one I just mentioned, so the monolithic data platform. It's great for consistency, but at the expense of agility and speed of execution, right? You have one team, one backlog, always, having to reprioritize given the business priorities. And as a consultant, sometimes that's great, because what happens is that you get called into a company, you build a very successful MVP, you ship that, and then all of a sudden, everybody in the company is on your backlog, right? You have a huge backlog of features to implement with your centralized small team, and colorful conversations happen at that point. So going back to mesh, it says, well, this is a failure mode, right? We don't want to do that anymore. Another failure mode is you might have different line of business that have their own platform in your company, right? But they don't talk to each other. Maybe they're in different cloud providers, they're using different technologies. We have so many technologies we can use for data, right? And when they have to share data between themselves, they have to ELT the data again, even though it's in one of these platforms already. So it's very, very inefficient. You lose control of the data as well, right? So the data mesh says, this is another failure mode. We don't want to do that. What it does say is, well, there are four core concepts in data mesh. The first one is domain-oriented data ownership. So think about your data in the company as a set. That gets divided in domains, in data domains. And every domain is assigned to a team as a product owner. They are responsible for that data, and that data only, right? That's the first important concept. Then you have data as a product. So this is a shift, from, well, I just have a data set, I just have a table. Data is now a product. It's made of data, obviously, and metadata, so data describing the data. Code that your pipelines need to run to feed your data product. And infrastructure where the code has to run. These three things form a data product. Then we have self-serve data infrastructure. So think about, you have different domains. We're going to build different platforms. We should provide a blueprint that is reusable, pen-tested for everybody to feel safe in this architecture to carry on with their workloads. And last but not least, federated governance. So you now have a distributed architecture, distributed teams. You have to establish standards, for the different platforms to interoperate. You have to establish routines, right? So these teams, they get together once every couple of weeks. They talk about, what's going on, what's their priority, if they have any dependency between teams. And this is why we have governance right in the middle of all the domains, right? It's really important to get that right from the beginning. So your data cataloging solution, your data quality solution, and your data lineage are all set, and everybody knows how to plug their platform with them. So how will this look like inside We'll see, right? So I started to do a bit of drawing, and well, it turns out for operational systems, it maps out quite well. These are already different companies. Right? They already have their own operational systems, and it makes sense to divide the data domains between those companies, right? So we have the design domains for the design partner, the construction domain for the construction partner, and so on. And data products that are going to be built with the data coming from their operational systems are going to be served in that domain. They will be responsible for that as well in terms of teams. That's actually the next slide. So in terms of operational model, it also was quite a good fit, right? You just map the people that work already in those companies with those operational systems that know the data very well, that know the operational system administrators. They talk to them every day, they work together on data quality. So it made sense also to map them and empower them to own their part of the data domain. So great, now we have two options, right? We have to choose. And we sat down with the CIO of this company and the business leads, and we reflected on the pros and cons of each approach, right? As I said before, the centralized data platform, great level of control. I've been working with these my whole career. You have one centralized infrastructure to maintain, and you have a high level of consistency, one source of the truth, right? However, it can become a potential bottleneck because you have a centralized team. You constantly have to reprioritize your backlog. It's a bit slower to respond to change. I find that in centralized platform, how many times your pipelines have broken because somebody changed the source schema and nobody told you, right? There is a disconnect between the data team and the operational systems team. And more importantly, it didn't achieve the segregation we wanted for partners. So imagine you have one lake, and the partners were like, no, I'm not going to put there my data, even though you are assuring me that you're going to use folders, you're going to use POSIX permissions, and nobody's going to be able to get to my data. But they didn't want to, they were quite adamant that that's not the best solution for them. On the other hand, data mesh achieves this segregation by design, right? Different domains, different platforms. It reacts well, it has a chance to react better than the centralized data platform, right, on changes. Because these people work closely with the operational system administrators, they can have a chance of knowing what's coming, what changes are coming, what new operational systems are getting rolled out in those companies, right? However, it's not all roses, obviously. The initial setup can be complicated, and it also requires a shift of mindset from a centralized team to a distributed team. I have to say this was the easier part for me because there was no centralized team yet. They were just looking at how can we do data in Salesforce. So it was easy to say, well, you guys have your own domain, your own platform, you focus on your data roadmap, and you guys as well. Like, you're a different domain, you will collaborate together, you will share data, but you're empowered to carry on with your own backlog by yourselves. And so the most astute amongst you must have already guessed what we chose, given the title of this talk as well. So we chose, obviously, data mesh, as opposed to the centralized platform. This is given the uniqueness of this business. So it's a joint venture. It's not one company. Again, multiple partners. And given the non-functional requirements, especially around the network segregation between partners. So that's great. We chose to do data mesh. Great thing to choose. But what about now? Well, it turns out you have to establish a lot of standards for data mesh to work in a good way. You have your data format standard to choose, your data sharing standard to choose. You have to decide how these different nodes and domains are going to operate at the infrastructure level. How is the infra VNet connectivity going to work? What's your data catalog standard? What's your data quality standard? How are you going to log data quality metrics on your data products? What's the data lineage solution? Well, today we're just going to focus on the first two. I don't have time, unfortunately, to go over the rest. So let's first talk about the data standard. And the choice that we made was Delta, right? For many reasons. Right? Obviously, you can enforce your schema in Delta. You have transactions, ACID transactions on Spark. That's a single transaction, right? That has the ACID properties. You can time travel. You can save costs because Delta uses the snappy Parquet compression technique, so your data takes less storage in your storage accounts. You can do merges to your data products, but most importantly, it's open. So if in the future we get a very difficult partner to work with, they don't want to come and work in Salesforce's Azure tenants, they just want to stay, maybe in a different cloud provider. Maybe they will already have their own data platform there, and they're like, well, we don't want to, change all that. Because Delta is open and can be implemented in any cloud provider, this gives us that flexibility that we were looking for, right? It gives us confidence that we can, for those new partners, we can accommodate their needs, right? Next, data sharing standard. So we chose Delta sharing. And for those of you who don't know, Delta sharing is essentially in-place data sharing. So your data doesn't move from a storage account to another. It moves in memory of your Spark cluster, right? But it doesn't actually move. You don't have to ELT the data again after it was already extracted from the operational system. It's secure and auditable by default, so there is a trail of, there's a log of whoever is going to access this data product and this in the delta sharing. And again, it's open, right? So if we get a partner in the future that is not in the Azure tenant that we have, they are in another tenant, we can use delta sharing to still share data with them. We don't have to redo the wheel again, right? So how does this look like, actually, delta sharing? Pretty good product, right? So let's say we have two domains that are internal to Sizewell C, right? The partner decided to build their data platform in Sizewell C tenant. And the first partner has to share data to the other partner. Well, here we use Unity Catalog, and it's a simple grant. So that data team owning this domain, all they have to do to share that data product over there is just a simple grant. That's it, job done. What about, when a partner, if a partner is going to be external to this Azure tenant, right? Maybe they're going to be in AWS, GCP. How do we do that? How do we share the data? Well, we use this library, delta sharing. The data provider partner will create a share. It will alter the share, adding the data products stored in Delta that they want to share. They will share the configuration file to the receiving partner, and that's it. Pretty amazing, right? One technology for all these use cases. So I'm going to talk a bit about results here, and data mesh is actually measured a bit differently than centralized data platforms. So typically, in a centralized platform, you measure how many feeds you're getting in the platform and you're transforming, right? What data volumes. Here, you also measure how many data products are shared between the different domains. So for the mesh to be really successful, they have to use the sharing capabilities of the mesh, right? Different teams. So at the moment, we have 20 plus shared data products. We have 150 developed data products. And whenever there is a new operational system that gets rolled out, the source-aligned data products, which means the data product that are closely aligned to the schema of the source, that's done in days. Because the teams are really close to the operational system administrators, right? They know what change is coming. And they're able to do that in days. They have that visibility. Another success is data governance. So sometimes in centralized data platform, you struggle. Who owns this pipeline? Who owns this data asset? Well, it broke today. Who's going to fix it? So here we have achieved 100% data product ownership. It means that a data product doesn't even get to production if it's not tagged with the data owner, which is usually the product owner of that specific data domain. And about data quality issues, well, they are also resolved in days, right? We had to change people job descriptions, and as part of that change, now they look after these data products. They're responsible for the data quality of those products. We have dashboards that alert when a pipeline fails or a data quality score goes down. So these people are incentivized to work together, again, with the source system administrators to resolve that. It's never the solution to fix your data quality issues in your data platform. It's never the solution, because the next batch, the next day, or the next hour, whenever that is, you're going to have the same problem that you had before, right? So the solution is make these data people work closely with the source system owners, and the source system owners are the only people who can resolve your data quality issues that then are going to be reflected in your data products, right? And last, I'm happy to report we have 3 domains at the moment: the project controls, the construction, and the design domain. And all the partners that we engaged so far, they were confident that we achieved a good level of segregation within the same Azure tenant, and they decided to implement their platform within this mesh ecosystem. So what's next, right? This is a journey, especially we work on the bleeding edge of tech, so these technologies always evolve, right? So what's next for this platform and for this client? Well, you must have heard the announcement about Marketplace. Some data products here are really unique. I've never seen, the data that they have in this platform before, right? It's a pretty peculiar industry vertical to work in. So we are very excited for the partners to use Databricks Marketplace functionality. They can share their data products not only between themselves, but also externally, monetize that. They're going to be able to also monetize the notebooks and the solution accelerators that we also as Amanat provided on that. Next, as you can tell, the focus of this platform at the beginning was just reporting, right? And setting these teams up for success rather than failure, right? We wanted to empower them to carry on with their own backlog. We wanted to empower them to feel confident that they can work in the Azure environment that we established for them, and it's secure, it's auditable, right? But the next focus for us is machine learning data products, right? So because we have already this good foundation on Delta and Delta sharing, we can enable a whole range of machine learning use cases. A big topic is the summarization of technical documents. This is a very technical, document-heavy project, as you can imagine. You have thousands of engineers, civil engineers working on the construction, and having an assistant that can summarize maybe a technical document is a great help. We can also do predictive maintenance on machinery, and maybe we can use large language models to help with public relations and press releases and that kind of stuff. So last, we are going to see deeper integration with Microsoft. So part of our data governance framework involves Purview. We actually signed up for some private previews. For example, the integration of Unity with Purview, and some data quality capabilities within Purview as well. We've been working closely with the Microsoft product teams on that. So we are going to be really excited when these features get released in GA and we are able to adopt them in production. And this is part of us trying to always enhance that mesh experience, that development experience, right? We want everybody to just, new partners come in, we can plug them in. There is already a framework for data governance that they can actively work with. So that's it. I think we have about 7 minutes for questions now.